So I sat down and did the math and conclusively proved that the 2022 megatins are the most difficult tins to pull good cards out of and have the lowest percentage of actually getting you the good cards you want. So let's get into the video and I'll prove it to you. Hey everyone, I'm Moose and I sat down and did the math for the last 3 years of megatins, 2020, 2021 and 2022, and proved that the good cards in the 2022 tins are by far the hardest to obtain of all 3 tins, and you're going to get the lowest value out of the 2022 tins compared to the last 3 years. I know it's a little bit staggering, but I actually went and did the math. So let's start from 2020 and we'll talk about that. Now 2020 megatins was a 249 card set. It was the first megatins in which we no longer got promos. Of those 249 cards, 37 cards were super rares, of which 5 super rares were actually good value. There were 50 ultra rares in that pack, of which 12 were good value. And there were 27 prismatic secret rares, of which 15 were good value. That means out of the 32 chase cards that you could pull from this set, 15 of them were prismatic secret rare, so 46.9% of the chase cards were at prismatic secret rare, and there were 32 cards out of that 249 which were worth pulling, which made about a 12.86% chance of pulling a good card out of this set. Then we get to 2021 and the quality actually really went up. Out of 37 super rares, there were 11 super rares worth pulling. Out of 48 ultra rares, there was a staggering 23 worth pulling, almost half the ultra rares. And out of 30 prismatic secret rares, there were 13 good prismatic secret rares. So compared to 2020 tins, 2021 did have more value, with 47 out of the 258 cards being worth pulling, 18.2% worth pulling, compared to 12.86% in 2020. And out of those cards, only 27% were prismatic secret rares, which are 1 per pack. Remember, prismatic secret rares have half the pull rate of ultras and supers. So having prismatic secret rares have the bulk of value means you are half as likely to get value out of the tin as you are if the ultras hold the majority of the value. And let's not forget that the majority of the cards printed at prismatic secret rare are usually difficult to obtain anyway. The exception was the 2021 tins, where you had upgrades to things that were usually in ultra rare or lower, and upgrades to archetypes such as Dogmatica, Tri-Brigade and Virtual World coming in prismatic secret rare, but which were not too hard to obtain, but they were value upgrades which made them really helpful, as well as amazing cards such as Shadol's Schism and Ice Dragon's Prison. So the secret rares had a lot of value in 2021, but the ultra rares are where the bulk of the value went. That's where you got cards like Crossout Designator, Zeus, Triple Tactic Talent, Nadea's Servant, among a lot of others. So 2021 was a major upgrade from 2020, 18.2% of the cards were actually good to pull, and only 27% of the good cards were in prismatic secret rare. Well, then that brings us to 2022, and the whole thing takes it up. So there are only 30 super rares, of which 6 maybe are good and 3 of those are hand trap reprints, which don't really see much play. Ghost Mourner, Ghost Reaper and Ghost Sister, none of which see much play, but I'm including them because they're hand traps. Then at ultra rare you've got 45 ultra rares, and again you have 6 good ultra rares. And 3 of the good ultra rares are Nibiru, Dimension Shifter and Dark Ruler No More, all of which were promos in the 2019 tins. Not great so far. Then you get to the prismatic super rares. And the prismatic secret rares show a drastic shift this year. There are 35 prismatic secret rares in this set, of which 22 are chase cards. Compare that, 22 out of 34 chase cards in this set are prismatic secret rare, 64% of the chase cards are prismatic secret rare, which have half the pull rate of ultras and supers. Given the fact that this is a 275 card set, 34 cards out of 275 are actually worth pulling, right? Giving it a 12.6% good pull rate. That's lower than 2020's megatins. And 64% of the cards that are worth pulling are 1 per pack in secret rares. Which means that the only rarity where you had a good chance of pulling something good was Prismatic Secret Rare. Because in the supers, you had less than a 1 in 5 chance of pulling something good. In the ultras, you had a 1 in 7 chance of pulling something good. Whereas with the Prismatic Secret Rares, you had roughly a 2/3 chance of pulling something good. But you only get 1 of them per pack as opposed to the 2 ultras and 2 supers. That means that your value is really going to go down for these tins. You may pull cards that are of high value, but they are going to be in the Prismatic Secret Rare slot most likely, and you're going to pull fewer of them, which kinda sucks. And not to mention that a lot of these cards that are coming at Prismatic Secret Rare would have been printed at Ultra Rare had these tins followed the same formula as last year's tins. Things like Aluba, things like Pot of Prosperity, things like Lightning Storm, and things like Forbidden Droplets. If this had been 2021 tins, these would most likely have been printed at Ultra Rare and been way easier to pull. Now, even assuming that there's an even pull rate for each of those cards, which doesn't seem like it because some of them seem short printed, most of your value in the tin, 64% of the value cards in the tin, are sitting in the rarity where you only get 1 card per pack. That is not good for the tins. Overall, by math alone, the 2022 tins are the worst tins we've had since 2020, and that's just really, really sad. So, look, let me know what you think down in the comments about my math and my calculations, and whether you think these tins are worth getting. I don't think these tins are bad in terms of the cards they reprinted, but I think in terms of the size of the set and the distribution of the cards, it's not great. So let me know what you think down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Thanks everyone, see you next time.